Welcome back, everyone. So in this lesson we are going to cover SMB enumeration. Similar to the other lessons, we're going to jump right in and get on our Kali machine. Okay, so if we scroll down the list, we see the next in line is this RPC bind. We're going to ignore that right now because actually there's a tool that we can use that we scan SMB with and we get RPC bind information as well. So the tool that we're going to use today is going to be called the Enum for Linux. So it's a few different tools in one. It's going to be SMB client, RPC client, which covers the RPC bind here. It's going to be net and MB lookup. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that now. But before I do want to cover a few things. So I did run into some issues with Enum for Linux, and we're going to cover how to resolve some of those issues. One I wasn't able to fix, and it looks like it's an ongoing problem right now, and it's kind of important to our class. So we're going to do a couple things today that are going to, I guess, be used for enumerating Linux, just so you kind of get a feel for this. So the first thing I want to do is I want to locate the SMB configuration. Okay, and we're looking for the one here that's in Etsy. So if we nano into that, I put a couple configurations here in the global settings. If you go ahead and copy what I have here, and if you need to pause the video real quick and do that, that's fine. Just copy that and put it here, and then save it and close. So that way that our Enum for Linux will work all right. So I was having issues getting it to run because these settings were set to yes, or they weren't set at all. So once you do that, I also encourage you to update your machine using apt-get if you need to. But the major issue that I was seeing still does exist, so it might not even be worth the time. So if we go into Enum for Linux, it's pretty straightforward. All you type in is Enum for Linux, and then you just type the IP address of the machine you're trying to scan, so 131 again. And then it just runs through everything. So it's running through all those different processes we talked about. And while it's running, you can kind of come down here and look at some of the information that we can find. So it looks like we found a host name here that might be useful later. Looks like there is some default sessions allowed here with no username and no password. That might be interesting as well. And again, we found a host name, and we found some information here. What we really want to find is the OS information, and if you could see the issue we're having here is there's something wrong in the code that's not working right now. So I did look this issue up, and we're not able to, I guess there's not a fix at the moment, so we're just going to kind of ignore this. I'm going to show you a different way around doing it. Same thing here with some of the users. So if we keep scrolling down, there's share enumeration, so it can show you what shares are sitting on the SMB. Right now there's IPC and there's admin. And if we keep going, it tries to connect to those shares for us. So it tried to connect to IPC, and it said access denied. So there's no access to the IPC folder for us. And for the admin folder, it looks like you need a password. So we don't have that information. It's just trying with default blank passwords here. So we can keep scrolling down, and it looks like it's pulled minimum password length of 0 with no complexity. So that's some useful information as well. And again, it's just pulling more information here. So it's pulling some groups that are on the machine, group membership if it can. So kind of useful here. And if you scroll through this I've never really looked into too much. The most important thing I'm going to say is that you want to know the OS version of Samba. So whatever Samba version you're running, you need to figure that out. So in order to do that, we're going to actually use Metasploit. So if you recall, that is MSF console. We'll let that load up. And then once we find the information and we do some enumeration here, I'm going to go back and I'm going to show you a couple other SMB tools that might be useful as well. But Enum for Linux should be your go-to. And if you are having issues, I know my lab machine in the course did this. I did push an update to it and I fixed it. I know several other people have had that issue. But with this actual setup here with the, this is a newer version of Kali Linux, so you get an older version to run with the course. So this newer version, it seems like some things are broken. So that's unfortunate, but there's other ways around it. So if we're going to use the auxiliary modules again today, kind of what we went over in an earlier lesson. So we're going to search for SMB. And what we're looking for is we're looking for SMB version type under auxiliary. So once this loads, we'll kind of look around and see what we can find. Okay, and if we scroll up and get into the auxiliary section, we're really looking for an auxiliary scanner here. So we're looking for this exactly, SMB version. If we read the description, it just says SMB version detection. So I'm going to copy that. And all we have to say is use, and we can paste. Okay, so if you're ever unsure, you could type in info and get a little bit more information of what module you're in. So you're in SMB version detection, it shows you the specific module. And if there's any kind of description here, it'll tell you. It just says display version information about each system. That's fine. It also shows you your options down here, so it's kind of a 2-in-1. You don't have to type show options. So it looks like we need to set an R host. And that is it. We don't need to set any of these right now. So our R host is just going to be this machine here. And we'll show options again to confirm. Yep, so everything's in here, everything's set up right. All we have to do is type exploit. And there you go. So we have Samba 2.2.1a. So that's really useful information. I'm going to go ahead and exit out of here. And we're just going to use a tool called Search Exploit to see if we can find anything. I like to start more detailed. We'll try just 2.2. If we do 1a, it might be too detailed. Okay, so if we look through here, you see 2.0 and 2.2 arbitrary file creation. That could be useful. Really, the more we can exploit, the better. So if we're looking at buffer overflows, that's really good. And this falls right in line here, 2.2.0 through 2.2.8. So our 1a falls in line there. The rest of these, it looks like, if you scroll down here, they don't work. So not for us at least. So 2.2.2, 2.2.8. And if you come down here, 2.2.x, that might work for us. So it looks like there are several options, but if we're seeing the same thing repeat over, this trans2 open, there's a good chance that this is our exploit. So it looks like there's several different versions of the trans2 open. You've got a Metasploit module. We've got a few written in C here. So it could be that there's some varying differences or maybe some OS differences. We'd actually have to go in and read about this. So another way I like to do it is if we go into Firefox and we can go to Google and let's just search exploit DB. So if we come into here and we go to search, I'm really curious now about that trans2 open. Oh joy. Okay, so let's click on some vehicles here. Okay, let's search. Yeah, so this is some more information about what we're seeing. You can see these are Metasploit modules right here. And we have different OS types. So Linux x86, OS X, BSD, Solaris. And then you kind of see the Unix ones here, 1 through 4. So really you'd have to kind of come in here and see what the differences are, if there's any. It could just be that somebody updated the code or somebody rewrote the code to be a little better or just different. So we'll get into this kind of information later in the course because we have to read through it and see if we can create our own shell code in here. So we'll actually be coming in and editing some of this code and generating our own code, but that's a little bit later in the class. So we still got to get through buffer overflow section first, and that's coming up pretty shortly. So this is the kind of information we want to see. When we're looking for an exploit, this falls right in line of a possibility. What's great is there is a Metasploit module. So I'm not going to show you that now. I'm going to wait. But also an option. So if you're curious and you want to attempt something, I always like doing it with Metasploit first. Just to have a proof of concept, because Metasploit modules are pretty well crafted and defined already. A lot of these you find online, these other code, there might be some errors that you're going to have to go through and sift and try to figure out what's wrong. Plus you have to generate some of your own code to talk back to your machine. Metasploit does it all for you. So if you have a hunch that you have an exploit or vulnerability for the machine, I always like to use Metasploit and then come back later and write the code manually for the exploit. So that's my recommendation there. So now that we have some information and we think that we found an exploit, I am going to show you just a couple more options here. So if we go back here into our terminal, one thing we can do is MBT scan on the IP address. So this is just going to give us a little bit of information. So it's giving us the net BIOS name. This is just a way to resolve a host name here and perhaps pull a MAC address, perhaps pull some little bit of information here. If you do recall, we did have that already in our Enum for Linux, but this is just another way of doing it. And the same goes for this other tool here. So SMB client. If we do a -L here and we just type in the IP address, it's going to ask us for a password. We just hit enter for default password. It looks like we were able to log in anonymously. And here's where you kind of get the same information on share names and admin. So if there was a unique folder in here that you might be able to get into, it might be worth trying. You would go in and you would do something similar. I like to put quotations around it. And the syntax looks similar to this. And it doesn't look like I'm able to get into anything right now. So we have an SMB screen. Let's see if there's any information. So you can kind of come into here and see what you can get into. See, I just tried to ls and my access is actually denied. So even though we have the SMB login, we actually didn't get into this folder here. So you could try the same thing with admin, but that's exactly the issue that we saw with the Enum for Linux. So this is useful if we were to see like Ann's folder in here or Mike's folder or something that strikes of interest. IPC and admin are pretty common to see. It doesn't mean you shouldn't try them, but Enum for Linux tries them already for you. So these are just more things we want to look for. But like I said, the most important information you're going to find is the Samba version, because Samba has a lot of exploits. Samba's probably my favorite because you just run into so many issues and it's so easy to get in. I recently just did a pen test and there was still WannaCry open, Eternal Blue open on the machines. So not only that, not only was I able to get in a machine and dump hashes, I was able to use those hashes to pass onto the rest of the machines because they were using the same admin password for everything. So Samba is going to be one of your best friends in the course in terms of getting exploits. So familiarize yourself with it, especially since it's still recent in the news and they're still having issues with it. But for now, that is it. We'll cover more on this later. We'll actually cover how to exploit it. I just want you to be familiar with how to do some research and what you're looking into. So if you're ever unsure, you can always use Searchploit or use Google. Exploit database is good as well. There's many different ways of searching. So just kind of familiarize yourself with that. And the more practice we're going to get in the course, the better it's going to be. I feel like the capstone that we're going to do towards the end is really going to bring things together. So if you're still unsure where we're going, that's okay. You probably won't tie everything together until the end, and you really won't tie everything together until you're doing this for months at a time. So just know that this course is going to be a little infuriating, but we're getting there. So just repetition and practice. So once again, this is pretty good. Samba is going to be good for you. So that is it for this lesson. My name is Heath Adams, and I thank you for joining me.